When Animal Kingdom opened in 1998, Disney was in the midst of a parade craze that saw new parades being created left and right to promote new films and keep the parks fresh. Confusingly though, this wasn't the plan for Animal Kingdom when it was in development. But as the park's opening drew closer, executives demanded a parade be retrofit into it. This would lead to a parade being a central part of the park's entertainment lineup from day one until 2014. Parades went from something so integral that the CEO of the company required one to be a part of the park to something that people forget ever happened and that will likely never happen again. Animal Kingdom's development was complicated to say the least. While Disney had dipped their toes into live animals previously, building an entire theme park around them was jumping headfirst into the deep end. Imagineer Joe Rohde was tasked with leading this creative challenge, and while he has had a history of supporting entertainment, his primary focus when designing Animal Kingdom was making sure that the animals were the main stars. This led to there being no traditional Disney entertainment in the plans for the park. No stage shows, no character meet and greets, no parades, and no fireworks. But as Ron Logan, the executive vice president of Walt Disney Entertainment at the time, recounted, about 6 months before the park was planned to begin soft openings, Michael Eisner gave him a call. Eisner felt the park needed more in the way of the traditional Disney entertainment lineup, and they had the next 6 months to pull it together. While this time crunch would be difficult in any circumstance, it was made far worse by the fact that since entertainment was never in the plans for Animal Kingdom, the team cut costs by not building any of the necessary infrastructure for entertainment. This goes beyond not having the stages and theaters built in the park. There was none of the necessary support buildings behind the scenes. Logan's team worked quickly to get the groundwork built for 2 stage shows and character meet and greets in a temporary land called Camp Minnie Mickey, and another stage show to augment Dino Land across the park. I go into more details about these shows in my video talking about Festival of Lion King's history, but for this video's purposes, these shows and meet and greets had their backstage areas built into their theaters. But Eisner specifically wanted one thing to tie the park together, and that was a parade. With no time to build a massive parade storage building, a few quick sheds were put up behind Camp Minnie Mickey to house whatever parade the team could develop in the coming months. The route wasn't ideal, but they were going to have to make it work. They would have the parade enter and exit from a gate across an existing service access bridge in Discovery Island. The route would wrap around the front of the park, head across the bridge to what is now Asia, turn left and head towards Africa, before turning left again and completing the loop. So with those logistics out of the way, the question quickly became, what will this parade even be? Douglas May, vice president of entertainment for Disney at the time, was put in charge of the project and given an extremely limited budget and scope for the parade. While Rohde wasn't overly thrilled with the idea of a parade in his park, he had an example to point to of how it should be approached, and that was the 1994 Lion King celebration. The approach was that any human performers were meant to have a backstory beyond just dancers. They needed to provide an explanation for the parade as a whole existing in this world. This resulted in the idea that the people who lived in Discovery Island, which was called Safari Village at the time, were holding a celebration of all the animals that live around them and showcasing the art the animals have inspired. May loved the art of Rolf Nee and contracted him to help bring this art to life and design the parade. As soft openings for the park began, so would the run for the March of the Animals. The parade would begin with the title unit with a variety of performers dressed in colorful animal costumes. The title float looked as if it was created by scrap materials the villagers just happened to have lying around. The next segment would be comprised of frogs and headlined by a frog musician. After, some birds passed by, and you'd be greeted by the bee unit with a queen bee on the float trapped in honey below the hive. This was followed by a unit featuring a band of elephants, tigers, and a lion. The final unit of the parade was led by a series of insects, all trying to escape the giant spider on the float behind them. The parade was quirky, and the costumes were incredibly detailed and out there for a Disney park. But it didn't resonate with guests, basically at all. Disney scrambled to try to make this parade work and captivate guests the way that they hoped it would. They added a storyteller to the title float to explain the parade's backstory and interact with guests. More live music was added throughout, and even the name was changed to the March of the Artimals to better market the offering. But all of these changes just didn't work. The parade was too high concept for the average guest to plan their day around. Ironically, the same fate of something avant-garde and high concept missing the mark with Walt Disney World audiences would happen to the Tapestry of Nations parade at Epcot, which opened just a year later. The reason Eisner and park operators love a parade is that guests plan their days around it, and it pulls guests away from the rides during the peak time of day. Ron Logan talked about how in the early days of parades at Disneyland, operations would sometimes just send an unplanned parade down Main Street just to try and redistribute guests around the park when needed. At Animal Kingdom, this crowd redistribution was arguably more important than at an average park, because the park was designed in a way that guests might get lost or miss things, and with less traditional theme park experiences, guests missing those more tucked away experiences would only increase the demand for the few traditional rides. Disney was really relying on this parade to scatter guests in its wake, but that just wasn't happening with March of the Ardenals. Guest feedback was clear: the parade wasn't quote-unquote Disney enough. And so it seems that Disney took that as a challenge. In 2001, Disney unveiled Mickey's Jammin' Jungle Parade as the replacement for March of the Ardenals. This parade was given far more time and budget in hopes that it would successfully bring the Animal Kingdom together in the middle of the day. This investment included building a much larger parade building across the street from the previous one. This wasn't an ideal location, with it being over double the distance from the building to the park as Magic Kingdom's and nearly triple Disneyland's, but it would have to do. The parade almost took the concept and aesthetics of the Ardenals and Disneyfied them. The new parade would be a celebration of animals alongside the characters guests would expect to see. The first unit, led by Baloo, King Louie, and Rafiki, has a variety of kinetic animal structures and stilt walkers, followed by a recurring motif of the parade where specially selected park guests will be riding in an animal-themed pedicab. The music is set to an original song for the parade called The Rhythm of One. Next up, Minnie and the Chipmunks lead guests in a dance and sing-along to Pata Pata. This was followed by a series of oversized animal floats and puppets, along with Goofy and the Brayers teaching guests how to sing Mascanada.
Just so Mascanada after we do. Okay, now, here we go.
Timon and Turk usher in Donald, who's teaching guests Iko Iko. The final unit, led by Pluto, ushered a reprise of The Rhythm of One with a ton of guests on a safari-style float with Mickey at the back, waving and dancing to them. This parade solved a lot of the problems that the Ardenals had and successfully drew in crowds. It was a huge component of their marketing at the time of the Not a Zoo campaign, drawing attention to the non-animal experiences that the park had to offer. It not only redistributed guests around the park, but it also gave them an anchor to stay in the park longer. The guests' involvement created countless once-in-a-lifetime memories and added more life to the parade without additional performers. The unique art style and music choices still felt grounded in Animal Kingdom and couldn't be mistaken for a Magic Kingdom parade. At the end of the day, the investment in creating Mickey's Jammin' Jungle Parade showed how much value Disney placed in having a daily operating parade at Animal Kingdom, especially as the park found its footing in the grand scheme of the resort. This importance would only grow further, with the parade receiving a Christmas overlay, as well as a longer route option that started back by Kilimanjaro Safaris when the weather wasn't too extreme for the additional time performing. It was clear that Mickey's Jammin' Jungle Parade was an important part of Animal Kingdom's daily operation throughout the 2000s. As time went on, the fundamental issues of having parades at Animal Kingdom specifically were beginning to show. Executives knew that they would have to address those issues if they wanted to keep parades in the lineup of the new era for the park that they had begun planning. For starters, the parade route not being a part of the park's plan from day one caused a variety of issues. The pathways of the park were purposefully built to be narrow and winding to create a sense of adventure and discovery, but a parade thrives off wide pathways that follow a straight route. This helps create viewing areas for guests as well. Unlike a park built with parades in mind like Magic Kingdom, most of the areas of the park couldn't support the stanchions and rope that would typically assist in crowd control. It was hard for guests to then visualize where they were and weren't allowed to watch the parade from, putting that burden on cast members. The narrow paths also meant that even in areas where guests could watch from, they could only be a few rows deep. And finally, the pathways were bumpy and used elevation changes to elevate guest experience. But that also meant that performers and floats had to navigate a more uncomfortable surface than they were used to. The next major issue was that the parade route essentially forced guest flow around the park to shut down entirely. The parade encircled all of the major pathways connecting the different lands of the park, and because of the narrow viewing areas, there wasn't the space to pass behind guests watching. The choke points created in Asia and Africa specifically became major issues as attendance was increasing. Asia suffered especially after the opening of Expedition Everest, with guests needing to go against the parade route to go from the two most popular rides in the back of the park. This was only going to get worse as Disney tried to increase attendance at the park. Running a parade is also deceptively expensive. Disney World designs their experiences to be as repeatable day to day as possible. With so many once-in-a-lifetime visitors to the resort, the goal is to deliver a consistent experience across the year, unlike at Disneyland where locals are always looking for things to switch around and stay fresh. This is why Disney World entertainment sticks around far longer than at the other resorts. When Disneyland orders a new parade, it's so they can draw back in guests who don't want to miss out on the new parade or the fan favorite that they've pulled out of the vault. When Disney World orders a new parade, it's to have something that can run every single day for at least the next decade. So Animal Kingdom wasn't going to cut costs by only running a parade during peak seasons. The cost of running a parade isn't just the performers and floats. A ton of money is spent on the guest control and operations side of things. To safely run vehicles down guest pathways, you need to have a small army of cast members to keep things safe, and with how Disney World staffs their parks as if they're separate entities, it meant that Animal Kingdom was staffing a large team just for this parade. Then there's also the fact that the Disney company who was parade hungry and put one in every single park was gone. By 2013, Hollywood Studios was clearly winding down their parades, and Epcot had lost its parade shortly after the new millennium started. Disney World moved their parade investment to Magic Kingdom, ordering a massive daytime parade to coincide with New Fantasyland. So for Animal Kingdom, the cost to correct the infrastructure to support a parade was a hard sell, but not impossible. Some of the earliest plans to give Animal Kingdom more nighttime offerings included a new nighttime parade based off Japanese lantern parades called Rivers of Light. This parade was heavily rumored and a pretty open secret amongst the theme park community, but the cost to make Animal Kingdom a park that could support it and correct those fundamental issues were too prohibitive. So instead, Mickey's Jammin' Jungle Parade continued, but its longevity was coming into question.
And as you know, we've been making great progress on our work to transform Disney's Animal Kingdom into a park that offers a full day of fun. As we've already announced, we're creating a new nighttime spectacular. And we're anchoring the all-day experience with an entire land based on the award-winning film Avatar so that our guests can visit the land Pandora.
When Disney announced plans to build a land based off Avatar and Animal Kingdom in 2011, it was clear the goal wasn't just to add a new land to the park. The goal was to usher in a massive new era for Animal Kingdom with an emphasis on nighttime. This meant longer hours, more rides, and importantly, the first nighttime spectacular in the park's history. This was a massive strategy to finally end the narrative that the park was a half-day experience. This, however, would come at the cost of parades at the park. It quickly became apparent that this nighttime spectacular was a far more cost-effective way to bring large-scale entertainment to the park daily. World of Color had proven that nighttime shows didn't need pyrotechnics to be successful. So the Rivers of Light parade plans were dusted off and became the basis for a new water-based show in a dedicated amphitheater on the outskirts of Discovery River. This would help contain the crowds in one dedicated area and avoid the guest flow issues that the parades had. While Disney stayed quiet about the future of Mickey's Jammin' Jungle Parade when they announced Rivers of Light, just a few months later they confirmed that the parade would end its run at the park in May of 2014, with nothing planned to replace it. After its closure, the parade building would quickly be utilized for additional backstage support services, and the floats were either stripped for parts or moved into long-term storage, with two ending up at an Illinois museum. At the time, some thought that the lack of a new parade was only due to Pandora's construction, but by the time that land opened along with Rivers of Light, it was clear that parades were not returning anytime soon, if ever. Rivers of Light would open as a spiritual successor to the parades of Animal Kingdom by providing the large-scale spectacle that brought the park together. But it would face a lot of similar issues to March of the Ardenimals, with its high concept not connecting with a wide enough audience. That, combined with a myriad of technical issues that constantly plagued the show, led Disney to quietly discontinue the show in the midst of the COVID closures. There's almost a strange irony that the decision was made to invest in a nighttime show at the expense of parades, only to be left with neither 3 years later. While COVID killed Rivers of Light, it did, however, give us cavalcades across the resort in place of the entertainment that you typically expect. While every other park utilized floats and vehicles to make these cavalcades almost like mini parades, Animal Kingdom didn't. If there was any clear evidence that the back-of-house infrastructure and the desire of executives wasn't there, it's that even in an environment where Animal Kingdom should have been able to support something like a parade, they went a different direction. Instead, we got the character Flotillas. These were boats that would drive through Discovery River with characters and performers on board. Guests could catch glimpses of these boats all throughout the park, and it brought this river to life again for the first time since the Discovery River boats closed in 1999. The Flotillas were a breath of fresh air, especially as the parks began to reopen and the cuts to Animal Kingdom's entertainment were becoming clearer. Even as other cavalcades and character sightings went away, the Flotillas stayed, with many thinking they were going to become permanent additions. Some even thought they'd be combined into one massive water parade. However, in 2024, they were cut, leaving one cavalcade left at the resort, and notably, nothing even resembling a parade left at Animal Kingdom. Animal Kingdom made the decision to kill off parades at the park and remove much of the back-of-house infrastructure to support them at a time where it made a lot of sense for the park. The park was growing and had a clear vision for becoming a full-day experience that didn't need a parade as part of its lineup. The parades that filled a void in the park's earliest days had served their purpose, but as the 2010s began, they had become more of a headache operationally than they were worth. They spent 15 years fitting a square into a circle, so when they saw the opportunity to replace the value of a parade with a nighttime show that alleviated many of those operational headaches, it was an easy decision to make. But then that solution wasn't given the time to settle and find its audience like the parades were. And then once COVID gave them an excuse, Disney pulled the plug on the whole initiative that made it easy to end parades at the park. While Mickey's Jammin' Jungle Parade likely could have had a longer run at the park had they known the nighttime initiative would fall apart by the end of the decade, I still think the modern Walt Disney World Resort would have ended parades at the park regardless. Walt Disney World has shifted their entertainment strategy away from these big communal experiences and towards smaller scale offerings scattered around the parks. Magic Kingdom is the exception because those spectaculars are the predominant part of the park's brand, and that park was built from day one to house them. Whether or not you think this entertainment strategy is better or worse than previous ones, I think it's fascinating to see how Animal Kingdom ended up being this ideal microcosm of that change. Parades are likely never coming back to Animal Kingdom, and in a lot of ways, they never belonged there in the first place. But the parades we got served a unique purpose in helping the park we know today find its footing, and how we ended up losing them showed the difference in entertainment direction the resort has undergone since the Disney decade. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really think that the history of these parades is fascinating, and so I hope that came across. I also want to mention that I have merch available for sale now. My friend Jake did a really great job with the designs, and I'm just really proud of how everything came out. So if you want to check that out, the link's going to be in the description. But otherwise, thank you again for watching and supporting, and I'll see you in the next video.